This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. We've got developments in the Russia investigation to tell you about, and we're looking ahead at the State of the Union tomorrow. We also have breaking news on the president, his inauguration, and his business. President Trump's inaugural committee confirming in a statement tonight that federal prosecutors in New York have subpoenaed the committee for documents. In addition, a source telling CNN the subpoena is wide-ranging, seeking documents related to donors, vendors, and committee finances. It is important to note that this action's coming from prosecutors in the Southern District of New York and not from Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office. That's a sign that the New York investigation is heating up. And we're learning tonight that the Trump Organization has fired at least 18 undocumented workers from its golf courses over the past 2 months. That is according to the Washington Post. Much more to come on both of those big stories. And there's news on Donald Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. He will be sentenced by a federal judge in Washington on March 13th. This is in connection with his guilty pleas on charges of conspiracy and witness tampering. A separate judge in Virginia will sentence Manafort at a later date for his conviction of 8 financial crimes. That as President Trump won't commit to releasing Mueller's report to the public when it is finally complete. He claims that decision is up to the Attorney General. But let's remember, the president's pick for AG, William Barr, also refused to commit to the releasing of the report when pressed by a top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Shimon Prokupecz is here with much more on all of this. Shimon, your job is cut out for you tonight.
Yeah.
Good evening. Federal prosecutors looking for these documents. What are they looking for?
So I think you're certainly right, Don. This is, looks like things are heating up. This is certainly an escalation in terms of this investigation out of the Southern District of New York. For prosecutors to get this kind of subpoena, to go through this, certainly they would need to have wanted a lot of information. And it appears when you look through this, that this is what they want. They want almost everything that this inauguration committee has: documents, emails, text messages. What they're really looking for is they're wanting to see what foreign money, if any, went into the inauguration.
So what are the crimes then?
Well, it's a straw donor. We're straw donors used by foreign nationals to put money into the inauguration. It's illegal to use, to ingest, to put in foreign money into a campaign, inauguration. So that this is what it looks like they're looking at. There are other things as well that they're looking at, whether or not some of the money was misused. But I think the foreign influence, whether or not foreign money went into this campaign by straw donors, people acting as U.S. citizens, as Americans, and that's how this money went in. And someone I spoke to tonight reminded me that during the campaign, a lot of people weren't donating because they didn't think he was going to win. But once he won, once the president won, once Donald Trump won, everything changed. Everyone was trying to throw money at the inauguration, hoping that they can catch up to what they missed. So this is certainly an indication, we've said this so many times, that the Southern District is digging in. They have asked for so many records here. It's really stunning.
It looks like this investigation is heating up, and maybe does that indicate that it may be nearing an end?
Well, it could indicate that Mueller is nearing an end, because we know that Mueller was looking at foreign money that may have gone into the campaign or maybe the inauguration. This activity could suggest that the Mueller team working with SDNY has said, you know what, you guys are now free to go ahead and pursue this. I'm done on my end on what I was looking at. I'm now leaving this for you. I'm giving this to you. Start looking into this. And that could be what this is. I have said, and I do believe this, and many of the folks here at CNN who've been covering this, is that there are parts of this investigation, even when Mueller goes away, that are going to live on, because the Department of Justice is looking at so many different aspects that really have come out of the Mueller investigation. So this is definitely something that, the Trump Organization and the inauguration, certainly the Southern District of New York, is digging in here.
Thank you. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
You don't look a day over 50.
You're nice. Nice to be here.
Yeah, happy birthday. I really mean that. You've been working really hard over the past couple of years. I appreciate that, Shimon Prokupecz. I want to bring in now Susan Glasser, Douglas Brinkley, and Jack Quinn. Good evening to all of you. The subpoena says, Jack, that the investigation pertains to conspiracy against U.S. mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, among other things. This is pretty serious stuff. Jack, can you hear me? Are you with me?
I'm with you.
Did you hear my question in full? I can repeat it. Okay. So this is what the subpoena says, that the investigation pertains to conspiracy against the U.S., mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, among other things. Pretty serious stuff.
Yes, very serious stuff. As serious as it gets. And obviously they're looking at whether there were foreign donations being made. That, of course, is an incredibly serious crime, ties into the whole Russia angle, but it may implicate other countries as well. You know?
Susan, the subpoena also mentions false statements, which seem to be a real problem with Trump associates, right?
You know, the sweeping nature of this means we actually are still sort of patting the elephant blindly, in the sense that we don't know, is this Southern District of New York building a case around a particular kind of violation that they perceive in the inaugural committee? Is it a fishing expedition? Is it a very broad subpoena that seems like they're essentially hoovering up all the records? I think it's too early to tell so far, but it does seem like a breathtaking kind of frontal assault, right, on the Trump organization. And I'm struck tonight. Remember that you have key former officials from the Trump world who are cooperating with prosecutors who may have already offered them significant information and a roadmap, if you will, to what they should be looking for when these documents come back. And I think that's very important. It's not the very beginning of this investigation, but one that's already been going on a long time with cooperating witnesses like Michael Cohen.
Yeah.
And Rick Gates.
Yeah, interesting.
Yes, and Rick Gates, exactly, who was the head of the inauguration committee.
Douglas, let me bring you in, because it's yet another investigation in the Trump world. This one, this is only going to add to the clout around the Trump presidency, no?
No question about it. We probably have a new buzz phrase, straw donors. I think we're going to be hearing that in the next few weeks. Trump's inaugural was always a mess from the day he talked about, it was a larger crowd size than Barack Obama. And this idea of trying to do whatever he could to capitalize on winning, I think it was correct. We just had on that, nobody thought Donald Trump was going to win. Maybe Russia thought they could get some benefits from having him as the nominee, hammering away at Hillary Clinton. But lo and behold, once Trump won, naturally a lot of foreign actors were trying to buy and influence in the Trump administration. And if it's proven that this happened at the inaugural, this is just yet another massive, serious headache for a president that, is just has corrosion going on all around him.
Jack Quinn, the former governor, Chris Christie, former governor of New Jersey, said last week that the SDNY posed a bigger threat to the president than Mueller. I've heard other folks say that. I'm not sure if you agree. Do you think the subpoena might prove him right?
I think it absolutely will prove him right. And I have a hunch, as I indicated earlier, that this is going to be about countries in addition to Russia. Tom Barrack, who, and I want to be careful here, I'm not accusing him of wrongdoing, but his whole business empire has turned very significantly on his relationships with Gulf states, and doubtless these countries at that point in time were as eager as Russia or anyone else to curry favor with the Trump political people.
Yeah. Douglas, timing is everything, right? All of this is happening, and the president is set to deliver his State of the Union address tomorrow. Remember, one that was postponed. It's been very controversial. He and Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats have been at odds. The president's legal troubles cloud everything he's going to say tomorrow. Do you think?
There's no question about it. In this, we may look back, and this is the last moment where Donald Trump had a 40% approval rating. I mean, the rest of this year, the idea of a Mueller report coming out, the Southern New York District continuing to be looking into Trump's potentially nefarious activities. He had this state of, history remembers either phrases or moments. This will always be remembered as the Great Shutdown, that the State of the Union got canceled for weeks because of government shutdown. And now here we are again. He has affirmed Donald Trump, and there's still a kind of veiled threat that there'll be a government shutdown.
Douglas,
again.
Sometimes it's poll numbers, many times it's poll numbers. When you look at, the economy, they're low. They would be lower probably without the economy, but his poll numbers can defy gravity sometimes.
Well, that base does, but he went down during the shutdown down to about 37% in the approval. Now he's at 40. You usually get a bump out of State of the Union of a couple of points, but now with these headlines coming on about the inauguration and Trump business and illegal workers, and he just never can seem to get ahead of himself. Man, I don't know how he puts score points on the board tomorrow night if you're looking to unify the country. So I think it'll be another approach towards the base. He might be saying we're going to talk with Democrats for a couple, maybe on immigration, but he wants to try to sell us that there's another, caravan coming to the border, that this is a giant national security threat in order to still get that elusive wall, which he doesn't seem to be able to produce. Although you said earlier, correctly, Don, there's so much border wall already down there, he should just claim it and move on to another issue at this point.
Yeah. I've been saying that and just saying it's his, and I'm getting it done, even though other administrations had already done it. Hey, correct me if I'm wrong. He's always been. I want to move on to Susan, but his poll numbers, his approval rating has always been underwater, right? He's never been above 50%, half the country, correct?
Right now, Don, the only president in modern times that had as lower coming into this point in your presidency for State of the Union was Ronald Reagan in 1983. And that's the big hope for Trump. Reagan became a two-term president. If he could start finding something to galvanize the country, Reagan brought in veterans and got better at foreign policy. The economy got an uptick, and Reagan pulled himself out of that. But Trump is just sort of stuck at that 40% mark. Reagan said you need to be about 50% to govern well.
Got it. Susan, to you now. This is what a White House official is telling CNN, that the speech is bipartisan in tone. Is that a reflection of the fact the president is going into this State of the Union politically wounded?
Undoubtedly it is, and frankly, that would have been the normal response to almost any president when faced with the rebuke of the midterm elections and losing one of the two houses of Congress. You would have expected him to have already made this bipartisan play some time ago, but instead we spent January in a state of partial government shutdown and a sense of hopeless division in the country. And I'm struck by the fact that we're about to have this State of the Union even a few weeks late, and these are basically irreconcilable alternates that you're shoving at us, right? On the one hand, he's going to be very bipartisan, they say. On the other hand, he's unyielding and unmoving on his wall, and he may or may not soon declare a national emergency and essentially try to bypass Congress if he can't get what he wants frontally. These are not reconcilable. You cannot both be bipartisan and continue to pursue an immigration policy that says that there's a non-existent invasion in our South that justifies a massive military deployment of U.S. troops inside our borders, billions of dollars additional spending, and a wall. That is not a bipartisan approach. And, one interesting indicator, right, is that the speech is apparently being written by Stephen Miller, the young aide who has been the architect of President Trump's hardline strategy, who seemed to have had a strong hand in the famous American Carnage inauguration speech as well. It's hard for me to imagine that whether there are boilerplate phrases in there seeking bipartisanship, whether Democrats are going to come out and see and hear a bipartisan overture that has any meaningful chance of leading to a sustained different course in our politics. We know, for better or for worse, where our politics are right now, and they're the politics of division and partisanship and discord.
That's a good point. Hey, Jack, just a quick answer, if you can, given to what she said. He's going into it, the Speaker of the House, it's bad for the country. We have to get the wall. I'm going to declare an emergency if I don't. What they bring me, if it doesn't include the wall, there's not,
Look, at this point in Bill Clinton's presidency, I was there. His reelect number right now, going into the second term, was 39%. So he was well underwater as well, and he made a decision to reset, and he reset essentially by moving toward the opposition, the Gingrich crowd, working with them, essentially stealing victories that mimicked some of the policies that they were espousing. The question here is, will Donald Trump see the need to to do a reset now? Will he say to Nancy Pelosi tomorrow night, the American people want us to work together, to collaborate, to cooperate, and to get things done for them? Or will he instead throw down the gauntlet once again?
You're asking me. You're asking this current president
I think
to take a page from a Clinton? Good luck with that.
For the next 24 hours, that to me is the question. He has an opportunity now to reset. I suspect that he'll follow Ann Coulter and Rush Limbaugh and not do what a Bill Clinton would do in this circumstance.
Well, you get what you get then. Thank you both. I appreciate it. I thank you all, I should say. I appreciate it. Our big breaking news tonight, the Trump Organization has fired at least 18 undocumented workers from 5 golf courses over the past 2 months. That while the president is ranting about immigration and his border wall. Congressman Ted Lieu is here, and we're going to talk about all of it.
This is CNN Breaking News.
More breaking news tonight related to the president and his business. The Washington Post reporting that the Trump Organization has been firing undocumented workers from its golf courses in New York and New Jersey, in the New York, New Jersey area. Let's discuss now. Congressman Ted Lieu is here. He's a Democrat on the House Judiciary and Foreign Affairs Committees. Good evening, sir. So glad to have you on. Let's start with the big breaking.
Thank you, Don.
Absolutely. Let's start with the big breaking news stories, okay? I want to ask you about the report in the Washington Post that the Trump companies have fired 18 different undocumented workers at 5 different golf courses over the last 2 months. This, of course, while the president is claiming zero tolerance at the border, trying to build a wall.
It is unfortunate that the Trump Organization fired these 18 workers. They relied on them to generate a profit. There's no evidence they were bad workers. And what we see is politics getting in the way, and it's really harming the livelihoods of these 18 people. In addition, it's difficult for Congress to deal with this president when he doesn't rely on the same facts that everybody else does. So if you just look at basic facts, we know that border crossings are at a 20 to 45-year low. Violent and property crime are down across the United States. And immigrants, both documented and undocumented, commit less crime than native-born Americans.
Yeah. I don't think he could keep them on. Do you think he should have kept them on once it came out they were employing undocumented workers?
I think it would have been politically impossible for him to do that, but it does show that his organization was relying on people who were helping them generate a profit. There's no evidence they weren't doing a good job.
Yeah. In a statement released within the last hour, the Trump Organization says that they'll be instituting the E-Verify system moving forward. But I want you to listen to this. This is from the 2016 campaign.
What are we going to do about illegal hiring? Because the Republicans joined the Democrats and said in that bill a couple years ago, we're going to stop illegal hiring.
Well,
because that's the magnet.
That with E-Verify and with the various
are you for
methods.
it?
I'm for it. I use it. I'm using E-Verify on just about every job. At Doral, I'm using it, but I'm using it on the building, the old post office on Pennsylvania Avenue that I'm building into what will soon be a phenomenal hotel.
But isn't
and I'm using E-Verify.
Clearly, they weren't using E-Verify, even though the president said that they were. Why do you think that is?
Right. Yeah. Again, this is all politics for the president. But right now, we've got over 10 million undocumented people in the United States. And what we need is a pathway to citizenship so that these 18 people at the Trump Organization could continue working at their jobs without fear of being fired. Because if you don't have these 10, 11 million people working, then you've got an even larger problem. And so what we need is a pathway to citizenship, put everyone to work, and that will both grow our economy and also be the right thing to do.
The president's inaugural committee has been subpoenaed by federal prosecutors, and they are looking into allegations of conspiracy against the U.S., false statements, mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, inaugural committee disclosures, violations, and laws prohibiting contributions by foreign nations and contributions. Wow. In the name of
Yes.
contributions in the name of another person. I wanted to make sure we got that in there. That's a lot. What's your reaction?
I have 2 reactions. The first is it sure does look like everything Donald Trump touches becomes tainted with corruption. And second, this is an independent investigation run separately from Special Counsel Mueller's office. It's out of their Southern District of New York. These are seasoned prosecutors. They're going to look at whether federal crimes were committed, and want to see how the investigation goes. I'm on the House Judiciary Committee. We're also going to be conducting our own investigations to see what the president may or may not have known related to a whole bunch of different possible activities. We'll certainly be looking at this in the future as well.
Yeah, the president spoke with CBS yesterday. This is what he told them about the possibility of being impeached. Watch this.
The only way they can win, because they can't win the election, is to bring out the artificial way of impeachment. And the problem is you can't impeach somebody for doing the best job of any president in the history of our country for the first 2 years. It's supposed to be high crimes and misdemeanors. Well, there was no high crime. There was no misdemeanor. There was no problem whatsoever.
So he seemed to be saying that he couldn't be impeached because he's doing such a good job. But a new CNN poll found that only 40% of the country approves of the job that he's doing. Still, popularity or the lack thereof is not and never has been the standard for impeachment, correct?
That's correct. Impeachment is not about winning or losing elections. It's about whether or not the President of the United States committed federal crimes and what to do about it if he, in fact, did that. So in the House Judiciary Committee, we're going to hold hearings this year to look at that record. We don't have a record right now. What we have are different newspaper articles. We've got statements made on television. We need to have witnesses come in under oath, give testimony. We're going to subpoena documents. And at the end of all of that, there'll be a record for the American people to see, and then we can make a decision as to what to do from there.
He also told CBS that he's going to be leaving the decision to publicly release the special counsel's final report to the Attorney General, which is likely to be his nominee, William Barr. Is he setting up Barr to take the heat if Mueller's report is never released to the public?
It is highly disturbing that Mr. Barr seems to think that he doesn't have to release the Mueller report. I don't see how politically that's possible. This is probably going to be one of the most important documents in U.S. history. And for the American people to not be able to see it would simply be untenable. In addition, Democrats in Congress do have subpoena power. We could also just subpoena different people involved with the special counsel office to come in and talk. So there are different ways to get this information out. The best way is to simply have Special Counsel Mueller's report made public.
Thank you, Congressman Lute. Always appreciate it.
Thank you, Don.
Senior intelligence officials are speaking out to Time magazine, warning that the president ignores the facts they give him during intel briefings, and his, quote, willful ignorance has them worried about American security. The reporter who broke the story joins me next. The country's senior intelligence officials are reportedly worried that President Trump is endangering our national security with his disregard of briefings by the intel community. One official is telling Time magazine that the president displays a willful ignorance of the information presented to him. That article was written by John Walcott, an adjunct professor at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, and he joins me now. John, good evening to you.
Good evening. Good to be here.
Absolutely. You spoke to analysts who have compiled the briefs and officials who have briefed the president, and they are citing multiple in-person episodes they're concerned about. It is a very select group of officials with this access. So tell us more about why they're so worried.
Well,
Brought to you by Garlic.
The worst fear they have is that the administration will get hit out of nowhere with a major national security incident, something like a cyber attack on the financial system or the electric grid. And the president has simply done nothing in 2 years to prepare himself for that kind of eventuality, figure out who did it and how to respond to it.
You report that the president sometimes reacts with anger to his intelligence briefings. So officials are getting warned before the briefings. Talk about that.
Well, I think we've all seen examples where the president doesn't like what he hears. We saw one as recently as last week when the top intelligence officers in the country took issue with his view of a number of things. Never mentioned, among other things, the need for a wall on the southern border. And his response was to say that they need to go back to school. And privately, an official told me, he's the one who needs to go to school.
Yeah. Is that normal? Is it normal for a president to react in anger or just to absorb the information and try to work with it?
Well, and nobody likes to be told things that essentially say, no, you're wrong, and here's how it is. That's true in business. It's true everywhere.
Right.
But the difference here, I think, Don, is that, number one, he doesn't digest that information and have any second thoughts about his initial opinions. And two, he's starting from a very low base of knowledge. He's never really gotten involved in foreign affairs or national security policy or military policy. So he's starting from nothing, and after 2 years, the folks who try to brief him have not seen much of a learning curve.
You also write about tricks that briefers use to keep the president's attention, things like repeating his name as frequently as possible. What else?
Well, number one, they bring visual aids. That's the story in the Time magazine story about bringing a miniature mock-up of the North Korean nuclear test facility and putting a miniature Statue of Liberty inside it to help him grasp the size and the complexity of that complex. On other occasions, they bring maps, they bring photographs, they bring all sorts of things to try to help him concentrate. Yeah. There's one case where in the middle of a briefing on a fairly important subject, he started looking through a shoe catalog. And so it's very hard to keep his attention. And the other trick they use that he seems to respond to is to say Mr. Trump, Mr. President, as frequently as possible, every other sentence.
Yeah. You know, we're also reacting to this Axios report that shows 60% of the president's schedule is listed as executive time. Do the officials you spoke with have concerns about the frequency or infrequency of the intelligence briefings?
That's a great question, Don, and the answer is a simple yes. And in fact, he's spending less time being briefed now than he was at the beginning of his administration. A lot of the briefings are taken by John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, some of them by Mike Pence, the Vice President, rather than by the President himself. The other big difference, I think, is that he doesn't read the briefings. Barack Obama, for example, who also started from a fairly low base of understanding of these kinds of issues, although he'd been on the Senate Armed Services Committee, would take home enormous briefing books in the evening and read them. There is no evidence that this president does anything like that.
Wow. John Walcott, thank you for your time. Fascinating
Pleasure.
article. Thank you so much. Just how dangerous is the president's disregard for briefings from his own intelligence agencies? I'm going to ask two CIA operatives what they think. America's top intelligence officials increasingly concerned that President Trump is willfully ignoring information and analysis presented to him in the briefings. That is according to Time magazine. I want to discuss now. Steve Hall is here, as a retired chief of CIA Russian operations, and Bob Baer, a former CIA operative. So good to have both of you on this evening to discuss this. Bob, you first. Intelligence officials are being warned to avoid giving the president intelligence assessments that contradict stances the president has taken in public. What are the risks if intelligence briefers stop laying out the facts for this president, as one former intelligence official warns could happen?
Well, Don, it's enormous. It's like, attacks coming on Pearl Harbor, and you're afraid to tell the president because he happens to like the Japanese emperor. We're going to get blindsided. It's just a miracle. I think there hasn't been a war so far. I mean, this guy does not like facts. He doesn't like the intelligence community. He doesn't like the FBI. And as far as I can see, he gets his intelligence from his buddies on the phone, or from Kim Jong-un, or Vladimir Putin. I mean, I think it's very dangerous. I think we're in a really, really dangerous position.
Steve, is the president's disregard for these intelligence assessments more proof the president would rather operate in a fact-free environment that is politically expedient instead of dealing with the on-the-ground realities?
I think that's a good way to put it, Don. I think this president seems to be confused by facts, intelligence, and policy. I mean, the intelligence community's responsibility is to, collect information, analyze it, and then send those facts to the president. And that's why they do it. That's why most of us sign up, because you want to have an impact on the most senior level of policy making in this country. But policy is completely different from intelligence. Policy can have things to do with, what the domestic political reaction is going to be to a foreign policy decision the president makes. It could have to do with how much money is in the Treasury, especially if military is involved. So, again, to quote or to allude to a famous quote, the president is indeed entitled to his own foreign policy. He's not entitled to his own facts. And as Bob alludes to, who knows where he's getting those facts from, if not from his own intelligence community?
Well, I'm glad you said that, because if you think about it, this is Bob, this is a president who believes in conspiracy theories, right? And even the FBI reportedly wanted to investigate him as a Russian agent. I mean, that's got to be concerning to the intel community and the people who are giving the briefings.
Well, Steve knows better than I. I'd be very reluctant to give him sensitive reporting on Russia to this president. You simply wouldn't know where he'd go with it. If you had an asset inside the Kremlin, for instance, telling you the Kremlin's secrets, I would be very reluctant to tell this president. We know from the Washington Post that a lot of the Russian stuff is put into footnotes because then they know Trump will never get to those. And so you have pretty much, I think the vice president is getting the sensitive briefings, but not Trump.
Steve, go on.
What Bob was just referring to, and what I think your previous guest, John, was talking about, we're in a really, really dangerous and bad place if intelligence briefers at the PDB, the President's Daily Briefers, the senior-most analysts that go in to brief him on the part of the intelligence community, feel like they can't speak truth, feel like they have to edit themselves. Everybody has had a situation where you go into to your boss or to whoever, and you got to give them bad news, but it's a really bad situation if you feel you can't give them that bad news. And in this situation, when we're talking about U.S. national security and and if we're even contemplating the idea that senior intelligence officers don't feel like they can trust their own president, don't feel like they can give him the straight scoop because he's going to get angry with them. That's well, not only is it infantile, but it's extremely dangerous to our country's well-being.
Bob, we've been talking a lot about executive time, but is there another way to look at this? NATO's Secretary General credits the president for $100 billion boost in defense spending, and the U.S. and South Korea have reached a preliminary deal with South Korea, boosts its contribution to nearly $1 billion to keep 30,000 U.S. troops there. He's getting countries to contribute more, according to according to Secretary General. Is the president's unorthodox approach working?
No, because they're terrified of him. And NATO's terrified that he's going to pull out. The South Koreans are. And he's essentially blackmailing them for a little bit of extra money. But the last thing you want to do at this point is terrify your allies. We need them. We need NATO. We need the South Koreans. And they simply don't know what he's going to do. He could pull our troops out of South Korea, and the North would be in Seoul within hours. I mean, people are truly worried about this guy, and they're worried about his allegiance to Vladimir Putin and other autocrats around the world. They are very, very worried.
Well, listen, Steve, to that point, what Bob just says, I wanted to get your take on this, because on one hand, as he said, he's getting other countries to contribute to cough up more money, right, in defense spending. But then on the other hand, he is pulling the U.S. Out of places, saying they shouldn't be the world, we shouldn't be the world's policemen. And maybe he's doing more damage to these institutions like NATO in the process.
Even a cursory review of the history, which, from all reports, this president is reluctant to do, takes you back to pre-World War II times, even pre-World War I times, when there was a lot of isolationism, there was a lot of populism, there was a lot of nationalism. I think Rand Paul said something very similar to that today, where he said, hey, I'm really worried about fighting foreign wars, and let's focus on the United States of America. I mean, we have to understand that the interests of the United States of America are best protected by force projection, rather. You got to get out there, and you got to have those alliances like NATO. You have to have those tight regional alliances that help you not only predict but project your power against those who are inimical, who are against the United States of America, Russia, China, North Korea, places like that. Unless you do that, it doesn't do you any good at all to just sit behind shutters in the United States of America. Donald Trump, apparently, nobody briefed him on that, apparently.
Your information, you have been informative and frightening at the same time, both of you. Thank you very much. We'll be right back.
Sure.